Hello, guys. Welcome to our live show where we dive into the power of cloud computing with Azure Cosmos DB. Discover how this globally distributed multi-model database service can transform your business by providing high availability, scalability, and low latency. Whether you are using key value, document column family, or graph database, or Azure Cosmos DB has got you covered. Tune in as we express seamless integration with NoSQL and how to leverage these technologies for unparalleled performance. Don't miss out on unlocking the full potential of your data with Azure Cosmos DB. So this is your host Habibur Rahman, and I will be hosting this show. So let's start this. First of all, uh, my name is Habibur Rahman. I'm two-time C Shop Corner MVP, Microsoft Certified Solution Developer, and lead software developer at Now Software. And this is the agenda for our today's show. First of all, we will talk about Azure Cosmos DB, then pros and cons of Azure Cosmos DB, and the different available models. And at the end, we will integrate Azure Cosmos DB with ASP.NET Core MVC application. And at the end, we will have a Q&A session. So let's start this. First of all, Azure Cosmos DB is a global distributed database provided by Microsoft Azure. So it provides global distribution and it's a multi-model support. You can have use different APIs for different models using Azure Cosmos DB. You can use global distribution with just one single click, and you can also implement automatic scaling with SLA backend performance. Azure Cosmos DB provide enterprises level grade security with encryption, and it also provide fully managed service. You don't have to provision your hardware. And at the end, integration with Azure services is very easy with Azure Cosmos DB. So the pros of Cosmos DB is first of all global distribution. You can distribute your Azure Cosmos DB on multiple regions with multiple availability zones. Then you can have multi-model support. Basically, Azure Cosmos DB provide NoSQL model, MongoDB, Cassandra DB. You can integrate with any database using Azure Cosmos DB APIs. It provide elastic scalability. You can scalable Azure Cosmos DB for handling millions of requests with less than 1 millisecond latency. It provides a very high performance. It also provides SLA backed availability and performance. Azure Cosmos DB is almost 99% available, 99.99% available all the time, and it is all ensured by Microsoft to provide enterprise level grade security with encryption and decryption feature. It's a fully managed service by Azure. You don't have to provision your hardware. You don't have to check your hardware whether there is any issue or not. Microsoft will automatically manage it. They will automatically replicate it on different regions uh, for availability and security. And then Azure service integration, you can integrate it very easily with Azure services just like Azure Function, Azure Logic Apps, or ASP.NET Core MVC because it provides SDKs and APIs for almost all languages. And at the end, it's cost-effective solution. And few cons of Azure Cosmos DB. First of all, cost. If you have a very big data set and very high, you need a very high availability for different regions, then this will be a little bit cost. Then a learning curve. You have to learn a different concept of Azure Cosmos DB because it provides a lot of APIs for different models, and then consistency trade-offs. As your Cosmos DB can be replicated on different Azure regions, so consistency is very important. Then query limitations. There are query limitations. For example, there are few queries you cannot run on Azure Cosmos DB. For example, aggregate function, which you can use on SQL databases, but you can't use directly here. Then we have data migration complexity. If you are migrating your relational databases to Azure Cosmos DB, then there will be a little bit complexity because your solution may be an enterprise level solution and you have to deal with a lot of things, so it's very difficult. Then we have vendor lock-in, as Cosmos DB is provided by Microsoft. So later on, if you want to switch on any other database, it will be a little bit difficult because you have to model your database with your application very carefully. Then we have limited query optimization tools, then monitoring and debugging complexity. As your solution grows, monitoring is very essential for Azure Cosmos DB, and for problems, debugging complexity is very high. Then we have eventual consistency concerns, as we have Azure Cosmos DB availability on different regions, and if you are updating data in your Azure Cosmos DB, then it will be eventually the changes on different regions. So any person who is reading the data may get dirty data. So these things are important to consider while working with Azure Cosmos DB. And then we have limited offline functionality. Then, as we talk about multi-model support, Azure Cosmos DB provides APIs for these models. Okay, no SQL database. Basically, it's a key-based or document database. So you can use no SQL database APIs or drivers as with Cosmos DB. Then you can use MongoDB, uh, MongoDB for document database model. So you can, for example, if you have an existing MongoDB model, so you can use this model using Azure Cosmos DB API. So it's very easy to use. Then we have PostgreSQL. So if you have a relational database model in PostgreSQL, so still you can use Azure Cosmos DB APIs. Then Apache Cassandra, so you can also use this one. Then we have Gremlin. Gremlin is basically a graph-based database model. So you can also use this one with Azure Cosmos DB. And at the end, we have table storage. So you can also use table storage with Azure Cosmos DB. So this was a little introduction and pros and cons of Azure Cosmos DB. So let's dive into the code where I will show you how to create an ASP.NET Core MVC API where we can integrate with Azure Cosmos DB. And for this episode, I will be using NoSQL database API. I will show you how to perform CRUD operations on Azure Cosmos DB. So let's start it. Let me share my screen. Okay, so that's it. Uh, for this episode, I'm using Visual Studio 2022. I already have created one solution in prior episode, so I will be using that so that you can guys can easily access this code. I will be creating this ASP.NET Core MVC application, or I will select ASP.NET Core Web APIs. I will say it episode 2, and then I will be using .NET 8, and authentication type will be none. Currently, I'm not interested in any of these things. Okay, and I will be using controllers for this. So let's create it. Okay, you can see a new ASP.NET Core MVC project have been created. So there are few prerequisites that you need to set before using Azure Cosmos DB. As you guys know that there are two ways for using Azure Cosmos DB for development. First one is you can create your Azure Cosmos DB on Microsoft Azure, but for that you need a subscription and you have to pay for that. And I think instead of using that, I'm using Azure Cosmos DB emulator. So You can use or download this emulator from Microsoft website. I already have downloaded one emulator. So here you can see I already have one database. Its name is Cosmic Spark. So I will be using this database. There are a few existing container, and I am going to delete that so that I can show you how we can create containers and database programmatically. Okay. So first of all, let me tell you the hierarchy of Azure Cosmos DB in NoSQL API. Basically, first of all, we have a database. Database is just like other databases, and inside this database, you have a collection of containers. Container is just like a table that we have in relational databases, or just like you can say that a document group we have in NoSQL database. So we will have container, and then inside container we can have different items. So this is the hierarchy how it works. If I click on quick start button, here I can see the connection string that I need to use with my solution. Okay, so now let's move to my application. First of all, I need to install Azure Cosmos DB SDK. We can also use Entity Framework with Azure Cosmos DB, but in this episode, I will be using Microsoft.azure.cosmos. So this is the SDK that we need to use. Uh, I'm going to install this, accept it. Okay, my package have been installed. Okay, now first of all, I will create a service where I will write my code for communicating with Azure Cosmos DB. So let's create a new class, and I will say it student service. Okay, so this is my student service. Let me create a constructor. And now, first of all, I need to create Azure Cosmos client. Okay. So for example, I say client, and I need to the namespace using Microsoft.azure.cosmos. And here I will say it client is equal to Microsoft.azure.cosmos.client. Okay, so inside this client, I need to pass my connection string, and then we have Cosmos client option. And there is another function overload which provides another way. You can also provide account endpoint and auth key resource credential. So you can use both of. I will be using account endpoint, this one, and auth key resource token. Okay. So let's copy the values from my Azure Cosmos DB. Here is my URL. So, and then I need to copy the primary key. So these are my credential for connecting with Azure Cosmos DB. Okay. This is my Cosmos client, which have been created. Let me create a private read only and save this client. inside my private field so that I can access it later on. So this is my client. Next step is to initialize my database or create a container if I need. For example, if I create a function, I will say it initialize, and inside this function, I will create a database and then container. So I will say client dot create database if not exist. So you can also use just create database, and inside this you need to provide the database ID. As I already have created one database here, that is comics work, but now I'm interested to create another database, and I will say that database to uh, student management system, for example, SMS. Okay, so I need to put a wait here because this is an asynchronous function. Make my method async. So this will check if there is no SMS database, it will create one for us. Then we need a container. For example, I need container, and container is just like a table. So I will now call database dot create container if not exist, and inside this container function, I need to provide my container ID. So basically the name of the container and then the partition key path. Partition key path is basically uh, in NoSQL databases, it's the primary key by using which you can access your data. So I will say it students, and then my partition key will be slash ID. So this will create a container for me. Then of course I need to access this container in other function. So I will also use it separate. I will create another field this time, one for container, and here I will assign this. Okay, so now currently I have to call my initialize function, and then I can access my data on this. Okay, now next step is uh, write a different function for my services so that I can read, write data, or I can perform the CRUD operation on my Azure Cosmos DB. But before doing that, I need to create a model which I will be using with Azure Cosmos DB. So let's create a new folder with name models, and inside this, I will create a new item and say it student. Okay, so now uh, I think instead of creating a class, I will be using record. That's enough for me. I will say ID. I have name field. I have email. Okay. As we are working with NoSQL database, so I would also like to tell you how to save the nested fields. For example, I want to save a list of string for hobbies, so that you can understand how this works as well. So this is the model that I will be using. Okay. Now create another function which will insert my student. I now call my container dot create item async and pass it inside this and put await here because it's and then make it async method. So now whenever I will call this method, it will create a new item inside my database. Uh, okay, I think let's test this and see how it look likes, and then we will move to the next option. Okay, as this is the student service, now I will register it with my dependency injection service so that I can use it uh, and inject it in my controller. So I will inject it here, services dot add scope, and here I will say student service. I don't have any interface for now to keep it simple. Okay, I have a weather forecast controller. I will create a new controller. I need to create an API controller, empty one. Click on add button, and I will say it students controller. Okay, now inside this controller, first of all, I will inject my student service. Okay, now create an HTTP put method, and this method will be inserting a new student. Now create a new action, and this action name will be insert. It will get student as a body. I will say it request, and then here I will call my student service function. For example, I say it await student service dot insert this, and I also need to call my student service dot initialize async method so that it initializes the container and the database for me. And at the end, I will make OK result and say student created successfully. Okay. I need to make it in Rust because it's an async function. Okay. So I think it's look ready. Let's change my startup project and run. Okay, so everything is working for perfect. So this is, you can see my student API. Before testing that, let me put a breakpoint here to see whether any error comes or not, and click on try it out. Okay. Currently, I'm not generating ID randomly, so I can say it any ID here. I say it 123 and name is Habibur Rahman, and then email habib@test.com. And here I can provide my hobbies, for example, writing. I can say reading, and the last one, coding. Okay, let's run this to see how it works. First of all, if I inspect this request, it's getting all the values properly. Okay. Then go into the initialize function. First of all, check the client whether that have been created or not. So if I see client have been created. Okay. So this creates a new database name SMS, and then again if I run this function, it creates a new container. Okay. Continue it. Click my student insert function and okay. So it look like a new record have been created. So let's go to the Azure Cosmos DB emulator dashboard. If I refresh this and see a new database have been created with name SMS, basically a student management system. Then we have a container inside this database name students, and inside this container I can see items. If I click on first item, you can see my data is showing in JSON format and its ID, name, email, and hobbies. So this is how you can perform insert operation on your database. Okay. Let me create one or two more records inside my database, and then I will perform read operation on my database. So here I say bytes, or here I can say speaking and click it again, bypass the breakpoints. Okay. Okay. Make it a little bit more change and test it with different ID. Okay. Execute it. Okay. Now, three items should be in my database. So here are these three items. Okay, now I will create a new API from where I will access all my data. So let's go to my student service and create a new function. This function will be I enumerable student. This will provide a list of students, and I will say it get all students, and here I will write my code. So first of all, I need to call container dot get item link curable. So this will provide me an iQueryable to Azure Cosmos DB, and I can perform any query on this. For example, if you want to search data using any field like email or hobbies or name or anything, you can perform that here. But in this case, currently, I will be just returning this response, and I will say it I enumerable. Okay. Now create a new action inside my controller. I will say it get all and create a new I action result. This will be getting no parameter. Access the student service dot get all and then return the response to the user. So let's run the code and see how it look like. Okay, so here is my API. I have missed one thing. As you know, currently I have the logic of getting the container inside this function. So I have to call this initialize function. But I don't want to call this again and again. So currently I will just call it here again, container, and I will say it, or I will say an initialize function here. This is a temporary solution, but later on we can set up this inside our dependency injection so that we don't have to call this function again and again. But for now, to make it simple, I think it's okay. So let's run this. Now, if I click on get all, try it out, and if I execute it, now you can see that my API is returning a list of students. And these are three students that I have inserted in my database, Habib, Umar, and somewhere. So you can see that the hobbies are also coming in my nested field. So this is the a good thing of NoSQL database. You can store any type of data in your items because these are document based databases and they are very flexible and there is no schema concentrates on that. Okay, now I will create another function that will return me single item of student on the basis of ID. I will get call it HTTP get and this will be get inside this. I will create a new action, say it I action result get and here I need to input the ID of the student and then I will call wait dot student service dot get. I don't have get function for now, so let's create that first. I will say it's task of student, then get. Here I need to get the ID, ID. Here I can call container dot read item tracing. Basically, I want to read a student and I need to provide my ID here, then the partition key. So for now, I will select partition key as none as this is an await function. So I need to put an await before that. Also for initialize. Okay. Let's connect this function with my ASP.NET MVC action. Return the response. So that's it. So if I now test this and I will provide the ID for my item and this will return me that item. Try it out. I need to put the ID of the student, for example, 123, and this should return me the ID. Currently, it's giving an error. So what is the error? The response status code does not indicate success. So let's check this. What mistake we made, whether I'm providing a wrong ID or anything. So let's go to get function. It's using the container and then read item is. It's looking fine. Partition key as none is also fine. Uh, okay, let's run it again. Execute and ID is 123. Okay, and if I go to initialize the container, it's still so something missing in okay. Next step is to have read. So you and in this to provide and I container dot delete item and as I'm going to delete student and here I need to provide ID and then the partition key as the same function as well. So let's see whether it works or it gives error also. You again Now I will say it HTTP delete. The name will be delete, and then public facing cross action result delete string as ID. If it comes successfully, then I will say student deleted and call the delete function here. Let's test this. I will provide here. I will okay, now I am inside. So now we have to it looks so if I say Cosmos DBTS not found, so it means it is able to find the item that we need. Uh, Hello guys, welcome back. I lost the connection. I just checked that. Okay, so I was talking about how we can move our auth endpoint and auth key token from hard coded to our app setting. So I have created a new key in my app setting, and its name is Azure Cosmos DB. Then we have URL and key. So I will be reading this data from
Habib, yeah,
here.
okay.
So first of all, I will get my configuration, and inside this configuration, I will say URL. Currently, I'm using it, reading it manually, but you guys can also use options pattern for this but I think it's enough for now. And here I will say it key things to my connection. So pass this key here. Okay, let's run this to see whether it's working or not. Okay, so my solution is running now. If I go to my get all, okay, so it's only .NET. I hope that's small request you are. Okay, so I think currently, guys, let's wait for a few seconds and see if anyone have any question. Okay, one thing left that I need to share. You guys can also access this code on my GitHub repo. So let me push that as well. Prod operations for student using Cosmos DB. Let me push this so that you guys can access it. So let's refresh it. Okay. So I'm creating a new branch for each episode. So here, if you guys are interested to download the code or explore the same thing, you can access this code from my GitHub repo. My GitHub account is Habib-developer, and this repo is a public repo, so you can access it. So I will also share this repo inside comments, so you guys can that please. So that's it.